Hello everyone, it's Mackenzie. I'm going to be presenting on Klinefelter syndrome today. This presentation is for Bio 540 Pathophysiology with Dr. Joseph Leviner. So I wanted to start with just talking about the etiology of Klinefelter syndrome and the basics of what it is and how it occurs. So as you can see here, this is a karyotype of someone with Klinefelter syndrome, and as you can see where they've got the little arrow, there are two X's and a Y chromosome at the sex chromosome, the 23rd chromosome, which means that this is a male with an extra X chromosome. So that is someone with Klinefelter syndrome. Typically, as you all probably know, a male is typically just XY, so you don't need more than one X. It's a form of aneuploidy, which means that someone has an abnormal number of chromosomes. They could either have one too many or one too less. Yeah. And it only occurs in males. The genotype can be XXY, so it can have two X's or it can have 3 or 4. So those are like the 3 most common genotypes, but XXY I think is about 80 to 90% of most cases. So how this occurs is that an extra chromosome is added during the formation of the egg or the sperm, and this can occur in either the egg or the sperm. There's not really they haven't had any proof that it occurs more commonly in one or the other. So what happens is, I'll go to the next slide. That's what I'll do. So this kind of is a little picture of what happens to cause Klinefelter syndrome. So most oftenly it is a maternal or paternal meiotic non-disjunction. So it can occur in meiosis 1 or 2. So here on the right, I don't know if that's your right or not, but this is a non-disjunction occurring in meiosis 1. So the chromosomes are supposed to split into 2 different cells, but there's something happens and they end up in the one cell. And you come down here, they have 2. Here comes the Y. You got 2 X's and a Y. Klinefelter syndrome. So over here is non-disjunction during meiosis 2. So meiosis 1 goes as planned, but when you come down here to separate the chromatids from the chromosome, they are supposed to go in separate cells, but there's dysfunction and they end up going to the same cell. And then you got this guy coming in with his Y, and you end up here with XXY. These guys over here, XY, so they're normal genotype of a male. So there's another type of Klinefelter syndrome called mosaic Klinefelter syndrome. This happens in about 10% of cases, so doesn't happen very often. And the signs and the symptoms of it are more mild, so it's really not diagnosed very often. So this just occurs from a random error of cell division in early fetal development. And instead of meiotic non-disjunction, this is a result of mitotic non-disjunction after fertilization. So what will happen is some of the cells in the body will have normal XY chromosomes, and then other cells will have an extra copy of the X chromosome, or 2 extra copies, or 3 extra copies, so on and so forth. So this is kind of a picture of chromosomal mosaicism, but it's not representative of Klinefelter syndrome. I just wanted to make sure I pointed that out, because if in here you can see that they're missing an X chromosome. So that is not Klinefelter's, but this is just kind of a good depiction of how mosaic syndromes occur. And I also wanted to say one more thing before we got to the risk factors. Oh wait, I'm about to say it anyway. So there hasn't been any research that determines there are any risk factors for Klinefelter syndrome, as it is a truly random event. The non-disjunction event is absolutely random. It can happen maternally or paternally. It's about equal in both cases. It's also not hereditary, so if you have someone in your family with it, it doesn't matter. You don't have an increased or decreased chance of getting it. It's said that older mothers, so 35 and older, might be at a slightly increased risk of having a son with Klinefelter syndrome, but I've seen kind of battling viewpoints on this. Some people say that it's not a risk, and if it is, it's actually really slight. So, yeah. And also, there's a higher risk for more severe symptoms in those with more extra X chromosomes. So, those Klinefelter males who have XXY, their symptoms will be a lot more mild than those who have XXXXY. Okay, so description and characteristics. Got a little character dude over here so you can kind of see the symptoms. A lot of the time they're tall, long legs, long arms, and you can see over here the mean height is at the 75th percentile. They often can develop gynecomastia, which is enlargement or swelling of the breast tissue. They will have small and firm testes, azoospermia, which is the absence of motile sperm, which can lead to infertility, sexual dysfunction, and hypogonadism, which is a testosterone deficiency. So this testosterone deficiency a lot of times leads to these more female type characteristics. So during puberty, when testosterone is not being produced as it should, a lot of times those with Klinefelters will not start the typical puberty process as a typical male would. So a lot of times this is when they get diagnosed. But a few other things, they can have a slightly lowered IQ. They're at a bigger risk for osteoporosis. They have a hard time growing hair, like chest hair or armpit hair or facial hair. Here's a little depiction of the difference between a healthy male and a male with Klinefelter syndrome. So basically the healthy male just has XY, and our Klinefelter syndrome guy has at least more than 2 X's. So as you can see, they've got the breast development. Honestly, you can just really tell that it's more of a female physique. The hips are broader. The fat's distributed more like a female in the breasts, in the hips. Arms are longer, legs are longer, and testes are smaller. Here is a picture of someone in real life with Klinefelter syndrome. It's a 21-year-old male, and you can see he's got the longer arms, longer legs. He's got the gynecomastia, and he does not have any facial hair or underarm hair. So the childhood signs and symptoms are a little bit different than those that I previously talked about. Those are more commonly associated with adolescence and early adulthood and adulthood. So for children with Klinefelters, they'll often present with hypotonia with hypermobility, flat feet, and their knees will be bent inward. They will have speech, language, or motor delays, and they're at a higher risk of development of birth defects such as curved fifth fingers and cleft palates, and also they may suffer from learning disabilities. Incidence and statistics. So Klinefelter syndrome is the most frequently observed sex chromosome abnormality. It occurs equally in all races and ethnicities because it's just random. About 3,000 boys are diagnosed in the United States a year, and it affects about 1 to 500 males, newborn males. I saw another report. It kind of varies. It kind of goes from 1 in 500 to 650, so somewhere in there. Also, it's more likely that someone with XXY presentation of genotype is more often seen than those with the higher number of X chromosomes. And it's interesting, actually, 75% of males that are affected by Klinefelter syndrome are never diagnosed, which is often due to the fact that the symptoms are just really mild, and they just don't notice them, or they just might not have the education and just think it's kind of normal. So to diagnose Klinefelter syndrome kind of depends on what stage of life your patient or whoever is in. So prenatal testing can often diagnose Klinefelter syndrome. So this will be due to the fact that there are possible genetic abnormalities or a higher risk with one, or a child has presented with hypotonia or some other learning or behavioral difficulties. So they'll kind of come to their doctors and say, hey, something's going on, and that's how they'll kind of get that test going. Also, if an adolescent presents with tall stature, small testicular size, or they have not been able to complete puberty, that's another sign that they will look for before they kind of run their tests. And a lot of times the adult men that are being evaluated for infertility will go under a semen analysis and hormonal testing to see if that is concurrent with Klinefelter syndrome, and then they could do a karyotype to like really put the nail in the coffin on that one. So the karyotyping is really the only way to definitively diagnose Klinefelter syndrome, since it is a chromosomal abnormality. So treatment is kind of broken up in different things. So physical symptoms are treated a lot with testosterone supplements. This can be done by an injection, pills, or transdermally. This can just kind of help promote the formation of masculinity, and all that kind of comes along with that. Here is a picture that I thought was interesting of someone before and after hormone therapy. Treatment of physical symptoms continued, so a lot of times when they'll have enlarged breasts, if it's a physical issue for them, they'll have a mastectomy. They can be treated for infertility with reproductive technology, which is, there's a little diagram there. You just take the sperm out and put it in the egg. And then also they've been collecting and freezing sperm during adolescence in some Klinefelter's males, because they seem to have healthier sperm during puberty. Physical, occupational, and behavioral therapists and mental health therapists and counselors can kind of help with cognitive deficits, muscle control problems, and different ways to cope with the disorder. Social and behavioral symptoms is kind of the same. Different psychologists and things will help them deal with their symptoms. Prognosis is great. Lifespan is not affected by Klinefelter syndrome, but it can be shortened due to the risk of other diseases such as cancers, osteoporosis,